Imagine this. It's 2 a.m., you are broke, your child is sick, and you are holding a burner phone with 1% battery left. You have one shot to get the money you need to survive. You type a threat to your ex-husband's bookie. You press send. You pray. But instead of a text back, you see headlights. Blinding white xenon lights cutting through the darkness. Not one car, but 5. 5 military-grade Escalades surrounding your crumbling apartment building. This isn't a rescue mission. This is a siege. This is the story of Elena Cross, a woman who accidentally summoned the king of the Chicago underworld to her doorstep. What happens when a lamb invites a wolf into her home? Does she get eaten? Or does she become the queen of the pack? You are listening to Fate's Gentle Hands. This is She Texted the Mafia Boss Wrongly, and trust me, you won't be able to pause this one. The freezing rain tapped against my cracked window pane like skeleton fingers demanding to be let in. It was 2 in the morning in Chicago, and the temperature had dropped enough to turn the city into a graveyard of ice and gray slush. Inside my apartment, it was not much warmer. The radiator hissed and sputtered, dying a slow death just like everything else in my life. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the peeling wallpaper of the hallway. In my hands, I held the only thing my ex-husband Travis had left behind besides a mountain of debt, a burner phone with a cracked screen. My thumb hovered over the send button. I was shaking, not just from the cold that seeped into my bones, but from the sheer, terrifying adrenaline of what I was about to do. I looked down at the contact name saved in the phone, the banker. Travis had mentioned him once when he was drunk, rambling about a loan shark who held the keys to the city. I did not care about keys. I cared about the empty vial of insulin sitting on my kitchen counter. I typed the message again, my breath hitching in my throat. I know where the hard drive is. $50,000. Cash. Tonight. Or I send the location to the feds. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed send. 1 second passed. Then 2. The silence in the apartment was heavy, broken only by the raspy, wet cough of my 5-year-old daughter, Lily, sleeping in the bedroom. That sound tore through me sharper than any knife. The insurance company had sent the final rejection letter yesterday. Pre-existing condition. Policy lapsed. Words that meant my daughter was going to die because I could not afford to keep her alive. I stared at the screen waiting for a reply, a threat, a negotiation, anything. Nothing happened. The screen went dark. I let out a shaky breath, burying my face in my knees. I was an idiot. A desperate, foolish idiot. I had probably just texted a dead number, or worse, some low-level bookie who would just laugh at me. I was not a criminal. I was a data analyst who had lost her job when the firm downsized, a mother who was selling her furniture to buy groceries. Then I heard it. It started as a low rumble, vibrating through the thin floorboards beneath me. It grew louder, a deep, guttural roar that I felt in my teeth, the sound of raw power. I scrambled to my knees and crawled to the window, pulling back the thin sheet I used as a curtain. My heart stopped. It had not even been 2 minutes. Down on the street, slicing through the winter storm like predators stalking prey, were 5 black SUVs. They were not police cruisers. They were Cadillac Escalades, massive and armored, their polished black paint gleaming under the streetlights. They moved in perfect formation, a convoy of death rolling into my rundown neighborhood. They screeched to a halt directly in front of my building. Blinding white xenon headlights cut through the darkness, flooding my living room with an aggressive, exposing light. I scrambled back, gasping as the light hit my face. No, this was not a bookie, this was not a loan shark. This was an army. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I had poked a sleeping dragon and now it was at my door. "Mommy?" Lily's voice was small, terrified. I was on my feet in an instant. I rushed into the bedroom, scooping her up from the mattress on the floor. Her skin was hot, too hot, but her small body was shivering. "It is okay, baby," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "We are going to play a game. Remember the quiet game?" I opened the narrow closet. It smelled of mildew and old cedar. I pushed aside the few coats hanging there and set her down on the pile of blankets I kept for emergencies. Hide in here, I told her, gripping her small shoulders. Cover your ears, Lily. Cover them tight. Do not make a sound until I come and get you. Do you promise me? I promise, she whispered, her eyes wide and glassy. I kissed her forehead, tasting the salt of my own sweat, and closed the closet door. I backed away, my eyes darting around the room for a weapon. My eyes landed on the kitchenette. I grabbed the fruit knife from the counter. The blade was dull, the handle loose. It was pathetic. It would not stop a man, let alone an army, but the weight of it in my hand was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. Heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Thud, thud, thud. They were not running. They were not shouting, "Police, open up." They were moving with the terrifying calmness of executioners. I stood in the center of the living room, facing the door. My grip on the knife was so tight my knuckles turned white. I thought about Travis. I thought about how he had stolen our savings and run, leaving me to face this alone. I thought about the insurance agent who had told me, denied, with a bored voice. If I was going to die tonight, I would die screaming. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I could hear the wind howling outside, the blood rushing in my ears. I waited for a knock. There was no knock. Boom! The door exploded inward. Wood splintered and flew across the room like shrapnel. The lock shattered, metal clattering against the floor. A gust of freezing wind and dust blasted into the apartment. I screamed, backing up, raising the knife with shaking hands. Through the haze of dust and the gloom of the hallway, a figure emerged. He stepped over the broken door as if it were nothing but a minor inconvenience. He was tall, looming over 6 feet, filling the frame of the doorway entirely. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire life's earnings, charcoal gray, tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders that looked capable of carrying the weight of the world or crushing it. He did not have a gun in his hand. He did not need one. His presence alone was a weapon. It radiated off him in waves, a cold, dark authority that sucked the air out of the room. He smelled of rain, expensive leather, and something metallic, like blood washed away by whiskey. He stepped into the light of the street lamps filtering through the window. His face was hard angles and shadow, a jawline carved from granite, covered in the shadow of a day-old beard. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. They were blue, not the color of the sky, but the color of the deepest part of a frozen lake, where no light could ever reach. He looked at the knife in my hand, then he looked at me. There was no fear in his eyes, no anger, just a terrifying, calculating assessment. He was looking at me the way a wolf looks at a rabbit that has forgotten how to run. He took another step forward. The floorboards groaned under his weight. "You have exactly 10 seconds, he said. His voice was a low rumble, smooth and dark, like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. "Drop the knife, Elena." He knew my name. My arm wavered. The terror was overwhelming, drowning out every instinct I had except one. Do not let him near the closet. He took another step. He was close now. Too close. I could see the snowflakes melting on the shoulders of his wool coat. I could see the pulse beating steadily in his neck, calm and rhythmic, while mine fluttered like a dying bird. He stopped just inches from the tip of my pathetic knife. He did not even blink. "I said," he whispered, and the sound was more terrifying than a shout, "Drop it!" Our eyes locked. And in that moment, as the sirens wailed in the distance and the cold wind swirled around us, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The man standing in my living room was not a banker. He was the devil himself, and I had just invited him in. He had walked in. Not a fat loan shark as I imagined, but a reaper in an Italian suit. Before we see what fate holds for Elena in the hands of this stranger, please pause for just 1 second. Hit the like button and comment Chicago below to mark your presence. I will release part 2 tomorrow if this video gets 1,000 likes. The door swung open. And the man standing there wasn't the fat creditor I'd imagined. He was death. A death named Dante Versetti. Before we continue to see how Elena will confront this death, will she kneel and beg, or will he crush her in an instant? Please pause for a second. Press the like button below and comment the keyword Chicago if you're listening to this story at night. Your support is what motivates me to release part 2 tomorrow. And now, he began walking towards me. The air in the room shifted, turning heavy and suffocating as 2 more men stepped in behind the man in the charcoal suit. They were mountains of muscle wrapped in black trench coats, their faces stony and indifferent. One of them, a giant with a scar running through his left eyebrow, kicked the remains of my front door aside. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. 10 seconds. He had given me 10 seconds. I did not drop the knife. Instead, my grip tightened until my hand cramped. It was a useless gesture, I knew that. Against these men, I was nothing but a nuisance. But behind me, in that closet, was my entire world. And I would not let them touch her. "Time is up," the man in the suit said. He did not move. He simply tilted his head, a microscopic gesture of command. The scarred giant moved. He blurred into motion, faster than a man of his size had any right to be. Before I could even slash the air, a hand the size of a dinner plate clamped around my wrist. Pain exploded up my arm. I gasped, the knife clattering to the floor. In one fluid motion, he twisted my arm behind my back and slammed me face first into the peeling wallpaper. The drywall cracked under the impact. Dust filled my nose, mixing with the metallic tang of blood from my split lip. "Clear the room," the man in the suit ordered. His voice was bored, detached. "No!" I screamed, trashing against the giant's grip. "Do not touch anything! Get out!" The man in the suit ignored me. He walked to the center of the room, his polished Oxfords crunching over the debris. He pulled a handkerchief from his breast pocket. Silk, monogrammed, and picked up the burner phone I had dropped. He pressed a button. The screen lit up, casting a ghostly blue glow on his sharp features. He read the text message. My text message. He turned to me, holding the phone up. His blue eyes were devoid of humanity. "Where is it?" he asked softly. I do not have it," I stammered. The wind knocked out of me. "I was bluffing, I swear." He stepped closer. The smell of expensive cologne and cold winter air overwhelmed me. He reached out with a gloved hand and gripped my chin, forcing my head up. The leather of his glove was smooth, cool against my flushed skin, but his grip was iron. "You text Dante Versetti about a hard drive containing $50 million in laundered cryptocurrency ledgers, and then you tell me you were bluffing?" My blood ran cold. Laundered cryptocurrency, 50 million? I thought you were the bookie, I whispered, my voice breaking. "Travis, my husband, he owes money. I thought you were the shark coming to collect. I just wanted $5,000 for my daughter's medicine." Dante stared at me. His eyes searched mine, dissecting my pupils, my pulse, the sweat on my brow. He was a human lie detector, and I was terrified he would find the truth too pathetic to believe. "A bookie," he repeated, the word rolling off his tongue with disdain. He looked around my apartment. He took in the water stains on the ceiling, the empty refrigerator, the pile of eviction notices on the counter. He released my chin with a shove, wiping his gloved hand on his handkerchief as if my poverty was a contagious disease. "She is telling the truth," he said to the giant holding me. "She is nobody, just a desperate ex-wife fishing in the dark." "Do we neutralize her, boss?" the giant asked. His tone was casual, like asking if he should take out the trash. "No," Dante said, turning his back on me. "She is useless, but she knows the name. Burn the phone. We leave." Relief, sharp and dizzying, washed over me. They were leaving. Then a sound shattered my world. A scream, high-pitched and terrified. "Mommy!" It came from the closet. Dante froze. He turned back slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Alessandro," he said to the giant, "check the closet." "No!" I shrieked. Adrenaline, hot and primal, flooded my veins. I did not think. I reacted. I threw my weight backward, slamming my heel into Alessandro's shin. He grunted, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I tore my arm free and lunged. Not for the door, for Dante. I slammed into him, grabbing the lapels of his expensive coat, trying to push him back, trying to create a wall between him and my child. "Do not touch her!" I screamed, clawing at him. He caught my wrists easily, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than fear. but I was feral. I lowered my head and sank my teeth into the leather of his glove, biting down hard enough to bruise the hand beneath. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath. Alessandro was on me in an instant, a gun barrel pressing cold against my temple. "Don't," Dante commanded. Alessandro froze. I released Dante's hand, my chest heaving, my back pressed against the closet door. I spread my arms wide, shielding the wood. "You will have to kill me," I panted, staring straight into Dante's ice-blue eyes. "You want to get to her? You put a bullet in me first." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Dante looked at his hand, inspecting the indentations my teeth had left in the leather. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. He saw the desperation, the ferocity, the absolute willingness to die. He stepped forward. Alessandro stepped back, lowering his weapon. Dante reached past me. I flinched, closing my eyes, waiting for the end. But he didn't touch me. He opened the closet door. Lily was huddled in the corner, clutching a dirty stuffed rabbit, her face pale and sweaty. She looked up at the towering man in the suit, trembling. Dante stared at the child. He looked at her flushed cheeks, the dark circles under her eyes. He looked back at the apartment, a freezing box with no heat, no food, and a mother who fought like a cornered lioness. "Travis Cross," Dante said, the name sounding like a curse. "That is your husband?" "Ex-husband," I spat. "He stole from me," Dante said, his voice devoid of emotion. "And now the Russians are looking for him. If they find him, they find you. And if they find you," he looked at Lily, "they will not be as polite as I am." "Polite?" I laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. "You kicked down my door." "I am giving you a choice, Elena," he said. "Stay here and wait for the Russians to skin you alive to get to Travis, or come with me." "Why would you help us?" I asked, my suspicion warring with my fear. "I am not helping you," Dante corrected, buttoning his coat. "You are the only leverage I have against Travis. If he cares about his daughter, he will come out of hiding for her. If he doesn't, well, at least I will have the pleasure of watching his world burn." He turned to Alessandro. "Pack them up. Take only what is necessary." "And the apartment, boss?" Dante glanced at the peeling wallpaper one last time. "Torch it," he said. "Make it look like a gas leak, no loose ends." Alessandro grabbed my arm again, dragging me toward the door. Another man scooped Lily up. She screamed, reaching for me. "It is okay, baby," I yelled, stumbling after them. "Mommy is here." As they shoved me out into the biting cold of the Chicago night, I looked back. One of the men was pouring gasoline from a canister onto my meager furniture. My home, my sanctuary, it was gone. I was shoved into the back of the lead Escalade. The leather seat was soft, smelling of new car and power. Dante slid in next to me. The door slammed shut with a heavy final thud, the lock engaged. I was trapped, sitting next to the monster who had just ordered my life to be incinerated. The interior of the Rolls-Royce SUV was a different universe. It was silent, hermetically sealed against the storm raging outside. The seats were heated, the leather supple beneath my freezing fingers. But the warmth did not reach me. I was shivering violently, my wet clothes clinging to my skin. Lily was in my lap, her head resting against my chest. She was burning up. Dante sat on the other side of the seat, typing on a sleek smartphone. He did not look at me. He did not acknowledge the fact that I was dripping rainwater onto his pristine upholstery. "Where are you taking us?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Somewhere safe," he replied without looking up. "Safe for who?" I countered. "You or us?" "For my investment," he said coldly. Suddenly, Lily's body went rigid in my arms. Her eyes rolled back in her head and she began to convulse. "Lily!" I screamed, shaking her gently. "No, no, no, not now!" It was a seizure. Hypoglycemia. She had gone too long without food, without insulin regulation. "Stop the car!" I yelled at the driver, grabbing the partition glass. "Stop the car! She is seizing!" The driver did not flinch. He kept his eyes on the road, the speedometer reading 80 miles per hour on the slick highway. I turned to Dante, grabbing his arm. I didn't care about his suit. I didn't care that he was a killer. "She needs sugar," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Glucagon, insulin, anything, please. She is going to die, please." Dante looked at my hand on his sleeve, then at Lily's convulsing form. His expression shifted. The mask of indifference cracked, revealing something sharp and calculating underneath. He tapped the partition. Vincent, pharmacy, now. Then he pulled a phone from his pocket and dialed. Eris, he barked. Penthouse, 5 minutes, pediatric diabetic kit, severe hypoglycemia, seizure protocol, do not be late. He hung up and looked at me. Hold her head, keep her airway open. His voice was a command, snapping me out of my panic. I did as he said, cradling Lily's head. The convoy swerved, tires screeching as they exited the highway. They ignored red lights, blocking intersections with the sheer bulk of the armored vehicles. We pulled up to a 24-hour pharmacy. Alessandro jumped out of the trailing vehicle before it even fully stopped. He smashed the glass door of the pharmacy with the butt of his gun and disappeared inside. 30 seconds later, he was back, handing a bag through the window to Dante. Dante tore it open, glucose gel. Do it, he said, handing it to me. I squeezed the gel into Lily's mouth, massaging her throat, praying, begging the universe to let it work. Slowly, agonizingly, the convulsions stopped. Lily went limp, her breathing shallow but steady. I slumped back against the seat, pulling her close, burying my face in her damp hair. I sobbed, a raw, ugly sound that I couldn't hold back. Dante watched me. He did not offer comfort. He did not look away. He handed me a bottle of water from the car's console. Clean yourself up, he said. You look like a wreck. It was not kindness, it was an order, but I took the water. 10 minutes later, the car descended into an underground parking garage. We were ushered into a private elevator that moved so fast my ears popped. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a world I had only seen in magazines. The penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooked the entire Chicago skyline, a sea of glittering lights that looked beautiful and cold. The floors were marble, black and white. The furniture was minimalist, sharp angles and dark leather. It was not a home, it was a fortress, a museum of wealth and isolation. A man with silver hair and a medical bag was waiting in the center of the living room. Dr. Eris. The girl, Eris said, stepping forward. I hesitated, clutching Lily tighter. Let him work, Dante said, removing his coat and tossing it onto a chair. He is the best doctor money can buy, better than the interns at the county hospital you can't afford. The sting of his words hit its mark. I laid Lily down on the plush sofa. Dr. Eris went to work immediately, checking her vitals, setting up an IV drip with practiced efficiency. She is stable, Eris announced after a few tense minutes. She needs rest, regular medication, and proper nutrition. I will leave a supply of insulin here. I slumped into a nearby armchair, exhaustion finally overtaking the adrenaline. My daughter was alive. She was warm. She was safe. For now, Dante walked over to a wet bar and poured a glass of amber liquid. He took a sip, then turned to me. He reached behind the bar and pulled out a sleek, silver laptop and a thick manila folder. He threw them onto the coffee table in front of me. The loud thud made me jump. The doctor is for her, Dante said, leaning against the bar, swirling his drink. This is for you. I looked at the laptop, then at him. What is this? You said you were a data analyst, Dante said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerous again. So analyze. He pointed a finger at the computer. Your husband, Travis, has my hard drive. He has gone off the grid. My men are muscle, not hackers. They can break bones, but they cannot find a ghost. He took a step toward me, towering over the chair. You have 2 hours, Elena. Find him. Find Travis before the Russians do. Because if Vadim finds him first, he gets the drive and he gets the encryption keys. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the whiskey on his breath. And if Vadim gets the keys, I lose $50 million. And if I lose $50 million... His eyes flickered to Lily sleeping on the sofa. I stopped paying for the doctor. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I looked at my daughter, then I looked at the laptop. I sat up straight, wiping the last tear from my cheek. I pulled the computer toward me and opened it. I need his social security number, I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. And the list of his known associates. Dante smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. Get to work. The only sound in the massive penthouse was the rhythmic clicking of my fingers against the keyboard. 1 hour and 45 minutes. That was how long I had been typing. My eyes burned, my head throbbed, but my fingers flew. I was in my element. I wasn't the scared single mother here. I was the top analyst at my old firm. I was the woman who could find patterns in chaos. Dante sat across from me in a wingback leather chair, watching me. He hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. He just watched, nursing his second glass of whiskey, his gaze intense enough to burn a hole through the screen. "He is not using his credit cards," I muttered, mostly to myself. "He threw his phone away 3 days ago. But Travis is a creature of habit." "Habits get people killed," Dante commented dryly. I ignored him. "He is an addict, Dante, not just gambling. He is addicted to the noise, the action. He wouldn't go to a cabin in the woods. He would go somewhere he feels lucky." I pulled up a string of transactions from a shadow banking account I had found buried in Travis's email drafts. "Here," I pointed at the screen. 3 small transfers, $20 each, to a generic LLC. Dante stood up and walked behind my chair. He leaned over, one hand resting on the back of my seat, the other on the table. He was boxing me in. His chest brushed against my shoulder. The heat radiating from him was distracting, terrifying, and confusing all at once. "A shell company," he said, his voice rumbling near my ear. "Not just a shell," I said, suppressing a shiver. "Look at the timestamp. Every day at 4 p.m. That's when the races start at the tracks in Florida. But he's not in Florida." I typed a command script tracing the IP address of the transfers. "He's using a VPN," I explained. "But it's a cheap one. I can bypass it." I hit enter. A map of Chicago popped up. A red dot blinked in the industrial district, near the docks. "The old meatpacking warehouse on 4th Street, I said. "He worked security there for a month last year. He knows the layout." Dante stared at the map. Then he looked at me. There was something new in his eyes. Respect? Or maybe just the satisfaction of a predator who found a useful tool. "Smart," he murmured. "Very smart." "He thinks he is safe there," I said, leaning back. "He probably has a satellite set up for online betting." Dante straightened up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Alessandro," he spoke into his earpiece. "Get the team. 4th Street warehouse. We have him." He looked down at me. "You earned your keep for tonight, Elena." "Does that mean we can leave?" I asked, hope rising in my chest. "No," Dante said. "It means you get to sleep in a bed instead of a cell." Before I could argue, the landline phone on the heavy oak desk rang. Dante frowned. Nobody called that line. It was an encrypted line, known only to a handful of people. He walked over and pressed the speaker button. "Speak," he commanded. A laugh crackled through the speakers. It was a wet, rasping sound like sandpaper on bone. "Dante, my old friend." The voice was thick with a Russian accent, heavy, menacing, and oozing with cruelty. Dante's jaw tightened. "Vadim, I hear you are looking for Travis," Vadim said. "A slippery little rat, isn't he?" "I found him," Dante said calmly. "Did you?" Vadim chuckled. "Or did he want to be found? You see, I paid Travis a visit 10 minutes ago at that warehouse. He wasn't there, but he left a gift." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Dante asked. "He left his primary phone, the one linked to your tracking software. He sent a signal to me." So? "So I know where you are, Dante. I know where the girl is, and I know you are not alone." Dante's eyes widened slightly. He looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Elena," he said, his voice low and urgent, "get down." "What?" I asked, confused. "Move away from the window," he roared. Vadim's voice crackled again. "Look outside, Dante. Smile for the camera." I turned my head toward the glass. Hovering out in the darkness amidst the swirling snow was a small black shape. A drone. Its single red eye blinked at me. "Get down!" Dante lunged at me. He tackled me off the chair, his heavy body covering mine, pressing me into the plush carpet just as the world exploded. Boom! The drone detonated against the reinforced glass. The window didn't shatter completely. It was bulletproof, but it spiderwebbed with a deafening crack. The force of the blast shook the entire room. Dust and plaster rained down from the ceiling. The alarm system began to wail. Red emergency lights bathed the penthouse in the color of blood. Dante lifted his head, shaking glass dust from his hair. He looked down at me, his body shielding mine from the chaos. His face was inches from mine, his eyes burning with a fury that promised death. "He sold us out," Dante growled, his voice vibrating against my chest. "Travis led them right to us." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun. He checked the chamber and looked at me. "Can you shoot?" he asked. "No," I whispered, trembling. He shoved the gun into my hand. The metal was warm from his body. "Learn," he said, "fast. The bulletproof glass has cracked. The enemy knows exactly where we are. And Travis, The man who swore to protect me has just sold his wife and daughter to the Russian mob to save his own skin. Dante Vercetti is the only thing standing between Elena and a horrific death. But is he her savior, or just a different kind of monster? Will Dante hand Elena over to Vadim to save his empire? Or will he turn this penthouse into a fortress and fight to the last bullet? Do not miss part 5 tomorrow. It is going to be a bloodbath. If you are rooting for the Mafia boss to burn the world down for her, comment Team Dante below. And hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You do not want to be late for the war. The vibration of the explosion was still humming in the floorboards beneath my cheek. The alarms were not just a sound, they were a physical assault, a rhythmic, shrieking pulse that turned the luxurious penthouse into a crimson hellscape. Red emergency lights strobed, making Dante's face above me look like a fractured mask of war. He did not let me up immediately. His heavy body pressed me into the carpet, shielding me from the invisible rain of glass dust. I could feel his heart beating against my back, not fast like mine, but heavy, slow, and terrifyingly powerful. It was the heartbeat of a man who had lived in war zones his entire life. "Move," he growled, the word vibrating through his chest into my spine. He hauled me to my feet with a grip that left bruises. He didn't ask if I was okay. There was no time for kindness. Alessandro and 4 other men burst into the room. They were transformed. Gone were the stoic statues in suits. These were soldiers. They wore tactical vests over their dress shirts, holding submachine guns with a casual familiarity that chilled my blood. "Perimeter breached at the south basement access," Alessandro barked, his voice cutting through the wail of the siren. "They are cutting the power." "Get her to the vault," Dante ordered, shoving me toward the massive wall of bookshelves on the far side of the room. I stumbled, my legs feeling like jelly. "Wait, what about the doctor? What about Lily?" "Aris is with her," Dante said, not looking back as he pulled a thick, leather-bound book from the shelf. "The guest wing is isolated. This room is the target." The bookcase groaned and swung inward, revealing a steel door that looked thick enough to stop a tank shell. Dante punched a code into the keypad. The door hissed open. He shoved me inside. I expected a dark, cramped bunker. I expected concrete walls and canned food. I was wrong. The panic room was a sleek, high-tech command center. One wall was entirely covered in monitors, displaying every angle of the building's exterior and interior. The other walls were lined with racks. Guns. Rows and rows of them. Black, silver, matte, chrome. Assault rifles, shotguns, pistols. It was an arsenal that could level a small country. Dante didn't look at the screens yet. He walked straight to a rack, grabbed a black handgun, and turned to me. "Take it," he commanded. I stared at the weapon. It looked heavy, evil. I can't. I've never... "Take it!" He grabbed my hand and slapped the cold metal into my palm. It was heavier than I imagined. It felt alien, wrong against my skin. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Dante cursed under his breath. He stepped in close, behind me. His chest pressed against my back, engulfing me in his heat and the scent of expensive whiskey and danger. He wrapped his large, rough hands over mine, forcing my fingers into the correct position. "Finger off the trigger until you are ready to destroy something," he whispered, his mouth right next to my ear. His voice was a low rumble that sent a shiver straight down my spine, a confusing mix of terror and an electric, primal attraction that I had no business feeling in the middle of a gunfight. "Grip it high," he instructed, his thumb pressing down on my knuckle. "Do not let the recoil break your wrist. You aim for the center of mass, the chest. You do not stop shooting until they stop moving. Do you understand me, Elena?" I can't kill anyone," I stammered, leaning back into him involuntarily. His body was a solid wall of muscle, the only steady thing in a world that was tilting on its axis. "You are a mother," Dante said, his lips grazing the sensitive skin of my neck as he looked over my shoulder at the gun. "You will tear the throat out of God himself if he tries to touch your child. Do not tell me you cannot kill." He was right. God help me, he was right. I tightened my grip on the gun. "Good," he murmured. He stayed there for a second longer than necessary, his breath hot on my skin, before he pulled away. The loss of his warmth was immediate and jarring. Dante moved to the bank of monitors. Alessandro, report. They are in the elevator shaft, Alessandro's voice crackled over the intercom. Service elevator. They bypassed the lockdown. I looked at the screens. Dozens of camera angles showed the chaos outside. Men in tactical gear were swarming the lobby. Smoke filled the lower corridors. Then, my eyes caught movement on the bottom right screen. It was a view of the rear loading dock, a grainy black and white feed. A delivery truck was idling there, its engine running. Wait, I said, stepping closer to the monitors. That truck! It's their transport, Dante said dismissively, checking the magazine of his own weapon. No, I said, my voice rising. Zoom in, can you zoom in? Dante frowned but tapped a key. The image expanded. The driver was sitting in the cab, illuminated by the glow of a cigarette lighter. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was nervously tapping the steering wheel, looking back toward the building. I stopped breathing. I knew that nervous tick. I knew the slope of those shoulders. I knew the cowardly way he hunched in on himself when he was scared. That's Travis, I whispered. The rage that exploded in my chest was so hot it almost blinded me. He's not a hostage, he's driving them. Dante looked at the screen, then at me. His expression darkened. He worked security for a logistics firm, I said, the words spilling out like venom. He knows the service delivery schedules. He knows the override codes for the freight elevators. That is how they got in so fast. He is driving the getaway car, Dante concluded, his voice deadly calm. He sold you out, led them here, and now he is waiting to drive them away over your dead body. He thinks I'm dead already, I said, gripping the gun until my knuckles turned white. He thinks he can just trade us and walk away. Suddenly, the lights in the panic room flickered and died. Total darkness engulfed us, save for the pale, ghostly moonlight filtering in from the main room through the open vault door. They cut the main line, Dante said. He didn't sound scared. He sounded ready. Ting. The sound was soft, almost polite. It came from the main penthouse living room, the service elevator. The door slid open with a heavy groan. Silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then a metallic clatter echoed across the marble floor. A canister rolled out of the darkness, spinning on the polished stone. Hiss. Thick, white smoke began to billow out, filling the beautiful, broken living room, obscuring the moonlight. Stay here, Dante ordered. He reached out and touched my cheek, a brief, rough caress. Lock the door. Do not open it unless you hear my voice. Dante, I whispered, grabbing his sleeve. There were too many of them. He pulled away. He grabbed 2 handguns from the rack, checking them with a fluid, practiced motion. He turned toward the door, his silhouette framed against the encroaching smoke. Watch the screens, Elena, he said. Class is in session. He stepped out into the smoke. The world outside the vault door became a cacophony of violence. Gunfire erupted, loud, cracking sounds that were nothing like the movies. It was deafening. I flinched with every shot, pressing my hands against the cold glass of the monitors, watching the nightmare unfold in high-definition infrared. On the screen, Dante was a wraith. He moved through the smoke with terrifying precision. He didn't spray bullets wildly. He fired 2 shots. Double tap. A man in tactical gear dropped. He moved to cover behind the grand piano, fired again. Another man fell. It was a slaughter, but there were too many of them. I watched Alessandro and the other bodyguards engaging the intruders near the kitchen island. Muzzle flashes lit up the smoke like strobe lights in a disco from hell. My eyes darted across the other screens. I was looking for something. I didn't know what until I saw it. Screen 4, the hallway leading to the guest wing. The smoke hadn't reached there yet. The corridor was empty, bathed in the red glow of the emergency lights. Then a shadow moved. It wasn't one of the Russian mercenaries. This figure wasn't wearing body armor. He was wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. He was moving low, crawling on his hands and knees, hugging the wall to avoid the crossfire. He wasn't moving toward Dante. He was moving away from the fight. He was moving toward Lily's room. Travis, I hissed. My blood turned to ice. He wasn't waiting in the truck anymore. He had come up. Why? To confirm the kill? No. Travis was a coward, but he was a greedy coward. He was coming for Lily. He was going to take her. He was going to use his own daughter as a human shield to guarantee his safe passage out of this war zone he had created. I looked at the main monitor. Dante was pinned down behind the sofa, reloading. He couldn't see the hallway. He didn't know. "Dante!" I screamed, but the steel walls swallowed my voice. I fumbled for the intercom button, but the power cut had scrambled the internal comms. I looked at the gun in my hand. It was heavy, cold. "Finger off the trigger until you are ready to destroy something." I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a killer. I was a mother. And the monster was heading for my baby. I hit the door release. The heavy steel hissed open. The smell hit me instantly, cordite, burning ozone, and sulfur. The noise was physical, a wall of sound that made my teeth ache. I didn't look at the main room where Dante was fighting. I turned left. I ran into the shadows of the corridor, my bare feet silent on the marble. I reached the corner just as Travis reached the door to Lily's room. "Travis!" I screamed. He spun around, startled. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide and manic. He looked like a rat cornered in a maze. He held a small pistol in his shaking hand. "Elena?" He blinked, as if seeing a ghost. Then a twisted smile broke across his face. "You're alive. Good. That's good." "Get away from that door," I said, raising the gun. My arms shook violently. "Get away from her." "Elena, listen to me," he said, holding up his free hand, stepping toward me. "You don't understand. These people, the Russians, they're going to kill us all. But I made a deal. I can get us out. I just need Lily." "You need a shield," I spat, stepping forward. "You sold us out, Travis. I saw the truck." "I had to," he yelled, his voice cracking. "I owe them money, Elena. Do you know what they do to people who owe them money? I did this for us. If I hand over the girl, they let me go. They wipe the debt." "Hand over the girl?" I repeated, my voice trembling with disbelief. "She is your daughter. She is sick." "She's baggage," Travis snapped, his facade crumbling. "She's always been baggage. The medical bills, the crying, she dragged me down. Now she can finally be useful. She can save my life." He lunged for the doorknob. "No!" I squeezed the trigger. Click. Nothing happened. I hadn't disengaged the safety. Travis heard the click. He laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "You never could do what needed to be done, Elena. You're soft." He raised his pistol, aiming it at my chest. "Get out of my way, or I'll step over your corpse to get her." I froze. I stared down the barrel of the gun held by the man I had once promised to love forever. I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact. Boom! The shot was deafening. It sounded like a cannon in the narrow hallway. I didn't feel pain. I opened my eyes. Travis was screaming. He dropped his gun and clutched his right knee, or what was left of it. His leg was bent at a sickening angle, blood spraying across the white wall. He collapsed to the floor, howling like an animal. I spun around. Dante stood at the end of the hallway. He looked like a demon rising from hell. His suit jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was soaked in blood on the left side, the fabric shredded. Smoke swirled around his legs. His face was streaked with soot and sweat. In his right hand, he held a smoking hand cannon, a large caliber revolver. He didn't look at Travis. He looked at me. "Safety," he rasped, his voice rough with pain and adrenaline. "You forgot the safety." He walked toward us, limping slightly. He stepped over Travis, who was writhing in a pool of his own blood. Dante kicked Travis's gun away, sending it skittering down the hall. "My leg! Oh God, my leg!" Travis shrieked. Dante looked down at him with zero pity. "Be grateful I aim for knees when my shoulder is injured. Usually I aim for the head." Alessandro appeared from the smoke, his face grim. "Room clear." The rest retreated when we took down their commander. "Secure the girl," Dante ordered, leaning heavily against the wall. His face was turning a grayish pale. "And take this trash to the basement." Alessandro grabbed Travis by the collar of his hoodie and dragged him away, leaving a smear of red on the marble. Travis's screams faded as the elevator doors closed. I stood there shaking. The gun was still in my hand. Dante looked at me. He tried to stand straight, but his knees buckled. "Dante!" I dropped the gun and rushed to him, catching him just as he slid down the wall. His skin was burning hot. His shirt was saturated with blood. "I'm fine," he grunted, trying to push me away. "Shut up," I said, my voice thick with tears. "You are not fine." I looked at his shoulder. It was a mess. A bullet had torn through the muscle. "We need a hospital," I said, panic rising again. "No hospital." He winced, grabbing my wrist with his good hand. "No police, no records." "You're bleeding out." "Then fix it," he whispered, his blue eyes locking onto mine. "You're a mother. You fix things." fix me. The silence that followed the battle was heavier than the noise. The penthouse smelled of death, burnt gunpowder, copper blood, and fear. I had helped Dante into the main bathroom. It was a cavernous space of black marble and gold fixtures, now stained with the evidence of violence. He sat on the edge of the massive bathtub, his breathing ragged. I knelt between his legs, a pair of surgical scissors in my hand, part of the medical kit Dr. Eris had left for Lily. "Do it," Dante gritted out. I cut the fabric of his shirt. It peeled away with a wet, sticky sound. I gasped. The wound was angry and jagged, a furrow dug deep into the muscle of his left deltoid. It was bleeding sluggishly, but it was deep. "The bullet went through," Dante said, examining the wound with a detachment that terrified me. "No exit wound shrapnel. Just need to clean it and stitch it." I sew stuffed animals," I said, my hands trembling. "I don't sew people." "Skin is just fabric that bleeds," he said. He reached for a bottle of bourbon he had brought in with him. He took a long swig, his throat working as he swallowed the fire. Then he poured the alcohol directly onto the open wound. He didn't scream. He didn't even make a sound. His entire body went rigid, his muscles turning to stone under my hands. He threw his head back, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth would shatter. A low, guttural growl vibrated in his chest. I watched a bead of sweat roll down his throat. The raw masculinity of his pain, the sheer endurance of it, hit me in the gut. "Needle," he gasped. I threaded the curved needle. My hands were shaking so bad I missed the eye twice. "Elena," he said. His voice was softer now. He reached out with his good hand and cupped my cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear I didn't know had fallen. His hand was rough, calloused, and stained with dried blood, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "Look at me," he commanded. I looked up. His blue eyes were hazy with pain, but they were focused entirely on me. "You saved my daughter," I whispered. "You took a bullet for us." "I protect what is mine," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mine. "You need to stitch this," he said. "Focus on the breathing. In, out, just like you tell your girl." I nodded. I took a deep breath. I forced my hands to steady. I pierced his skin. He flinched, his thigh muscles flexing against my side. I worked quickly, pulling the edges of the wound together. 1 stitch, 2, 5. The room was intimate. Too intimate. The smell of the whiskey, the heat coming off his bare chest, the blood on my hands that belonged to him. It was a blood bond. We were no longer strangers. We were accomplices. I tied the final knot and snipped the thread. "Done," I exhaled, slumping back on my heels. Dante looked down at his shoulder. It was ugly, but it was closed. "Good work," he murmured. He didn't move away. I didn't move away. I was still kneeling between his legs. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a strange, hollow craving. I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted to feel alive. Dante leaned forward. His face was inches from mine. I could feel his breath on my lips. He smelled of bourbon and smoke. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. The intensity of it scorched me. "I almost lost it," he confessed, his voice a rough whisper. "When I saw him going for the room, when I saw you in the hallway." "You came back," I said. "I will always come back," he vowed. He leaned closer. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding a different rhythm now. Not fear, desire, dark, dangerous desire. His lips brushed against the corner of my mouth, a tease, a promise. "Boss." The voice shattered the moment like a hammer hitting glass. I jerked back. Dante froze, a flash of annoyance crossing his face. Alessandro stood in the doorway of the bathroom, looking pointedly away from us. "Speak," Dante growled, not moving his hand from my knee. "Travis is in the chair," Alessandro said. "He is singing like a bird. He gave us the encryption codes for the hard drive." Dante's expression hardened. The vulnerable man who needed stitching was gone. The Godfather was back. "But," Alessandro hesitated. "He says the final layer of security, it's biometric. It needs a voice print and a password." "Whose?" Dante asked. "Hers." Alessandro nodded at me. "He set it up under her name years ago as a failsafe. Only Elena can open it." Dante looked at me. The heat in his eyes cooled, replaced by calculation. "Get up," he said, standing up and grabbing a fresh towel to wipe the blood from his chest. We are going to the basement. Dante? I asked, feeling the cold return. He paused at the door. This ends tonight, Elena, one way or another. The moment Dante let go of my hand, I felt colder than the blizzard raging outside. The line between savior and mob boss is razor thin, and I think I just cut myself on it. If you are still listening, please help me by commenting the word side by side below. Let me know that you are standing with Elena and me through this brutal journey. Your presence is the only thing keeping us going as we descend into the basement for the final judgment. The elevator ride down to the basement felt like a descent into the throat of a monster. The air grew colder with every floor we passed, the smell of expensive air conditioning replaced by the sterile, chemical scent of bleach and old concrete. Dante did not touch me. He stood near the doors, his injured shoulder stiff, his profile carved from stone. He was giving me space, or perhaps he was assessing whether I would break before we hit the bottom. The doors slid open. The room was soundproofed. I knew that immediately because the silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed against my eardrums. In the center of the room, under a harsh halogen light, sat a metal chair, and strapped to that chair was Travis. He looked small. That was my first thought. The man who had loomed over my life with his gambling debts and his shouting matches, the man I had once feared, looked pathetic. His hoodie was torn, his face swollen and purple from where Dante had pistol-whipped him earlier. His knee, the one Dante had shattered, was wrapped in a crude bandage that was already soaked through with dark red blood. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a desperate manic hope. "Elena," he croaked. His voice was wet. "Elena, baby. Thank God, tell him. Tell him to let me go." I walked closer. My bare feet made no sound on the concrete floor. I stopped 5 feet away from him. I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel love. I looked at him and felt nothing. Just a hollow ache where my memories used to be. "You tried to take her," I said. My voice was flat, dead. "I was trying to save us!" Travis shouted, straining against the zip ties cutting into his wrists. "The Russians, Elena. You don't know what they do. I had a plan. I was going to get Lily, and we were going to leverage her for safe passage. I wouldn't have let them hurt her. I swear on my mother's grave." "You swore on your mother's grave that you would stop gambling," I reminded him softly. "You swore you would pay the insurance premiums. You swore you would protect us." "This is different." He looked past me at Dante, who was leaning against the wall in the shadows, watching us with predator eyes. "Look, I gave you the codes, right? I told you everything. The encryption key is her birthday. It's Lily's birthday. I set it up for her." Dante stepped forward. He held out a sleek black tablet to me. "Enter it," Dante commanded. I took the tablet. The screen asked for a biometric voice print and a passcode. "My voice," I said. "My name is Elena Cross." "Access granted." The screen flashed green. The data, the $50 million in ledger files, scrolled down the screen. "See?" Travis sobbed, tears streaming down his bruised face. "I did it for you, Elena. I kept it safe under your name. Doesn't that count for something? We can take the money, we can leave. Just you, me, and Lily, like the old days." He was delusional. He was trying to gaslight me, trying to rewrite history where he was the hero instead of the villain who sold his family to a butcher. Dante took the tablet from my hand and set it on a metal table. Then he reached into his waistband and pulled out a gun, a matte black semi-automatic, heavy, lethal. He placed it on the table next to the tablet. "He is your past, Elena," Dante said, his voice low and rough, vibrating through the small room. "He is the reason you were starving. He is the reason your daughter almost died tonight. He is the loose end." Dante looked at me, his blue eyes burning with a dark challenge. "You decide his future." I looked at the gun, then I looked at Travis. "Elena, no," Travis whimpered, shrinking back into the chair. "Elena, please. Remember our honeymoon? Remember when Lily was born? I'm her father. You can't kill her father." I reached out and picked up the gun. It was cold steel, but it felt warm in my hand. It felt like power. I raised the weapon. "You stopped being her father the moment you decided to use her as a human shield," I said. I aimed at his chest. Travis screamed. He squeezed his eyes shut, sobbing uncontrollably, begging, pleading, snot running down his face. A puddle of urine formed beneath his chair, dripping onto the concrete. I watched him fall apart. This man who had made me feel small for years. This man who had stolen my confidence. He was nothing. My finger tightened on the trigger. I could end it. Right here. One pull and the nightmare of Travis Cross would be over forever. But then I saw Lily's face in my mind. I saw her innocence. If I killed him, really killed him, I would cross a line I could never come back from. I would be a murderer. I would be just like the men standing in the shadows. I shifted my aim just a fraction. Bang! The sound was deafening in the small room. Travis shrieked, thrashing in the chair, but he wasn't dead. I had fired into the concrete floor exactly 1 inch from his good foot. The bullet fragment ricocheted, slicing his shoe but leaving him alive. The silence that followed was ringing in my ears. I engaged the safety and set the gun back on the table. "I am not killing you," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "Not because you deserve to live, but because I refuse to let Lily's mother become a monster for a piece of trash like you." I turned my back on him. "But as far as I am concerned," I said, walking toward the elevator, "you are already dead." I stopped next to Dante. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Something between surprise and deep, burning admiration. "He is all yours," I whispered to Dante. "Do whatever you do with trash." I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the penthouse. As the doors closed, I saw Dante pick up the gun. He didn't look at Travis. He was still looking at me. The sun was blinding when I woke up. I was in a bed that felt like a cloud, wrapped in sheets of Egyptian cotton that smelled of lavender. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the memories of the night before, the smoke, the blood, the gunshot in the basement, came rushing back. I sat up. The room was unfamiliar. It was a guest suite, luxurious and impersonal. My clothes from the night before were gone. In their place, sitting on a velvet armchair, was a set of clean clothes: jeans, a cashmere sweater, a warm coat, and a suitcase. A suitcase. My heart sank. I got dressed quickly and walked out into the main living area. The penthouse was clean. The broken glass had been swept away. The smell of smoke was faint, masked by the scent of fresh coffee. Dante was standing by the cracked window, looking out at the city. He wore a fresh suit, black on black. His left arm was in a sling. He didn't turn around when I entered. "The car is waiting downstairs," he said. His voice was distant, professional. I stopped. "What?" "Travis has been handled," Dante said. He turned to face me. His face was a mask. "The Russians have retreated. Vadim knows I have the drive. He won't touch you now. It would provoke a war he cannot afford." He gestured to the table. A thick manila envelope sat there. "New identities for you and Lily, passports, a bank account with enough money to start over anywhere you want. A house has been purchased in your name in Oregon. It is quiet there, safe." I stared at the envelope. It was everything I had wanted yesterday morning. Freedom, safety, money. So why did it feel like he was handing me a death sentence? "You are kicking us out?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I am setting you free," Dante corrected. He walked over to me, stopping just outside of touching distance. The air between us crackled with electricity, with the memory of his lips almost touching mine in the bathroom. "You do not belong in this world, Elena. You saw the blood. You saw the violence. You are a mother. Go be a mother." "And you?" I asked. "What about you?" "I stay in the dark," he said softly, "where I belong." He looked at me one last time, his blue eyes searing into mine, memorizing my face. Then he stepped back, the wall going up again. "Alessandro will drive you. Goodbye, Elena." He turned his back on me. I grabbed the envelope. I grabbed the suitcase. I walked to the elevator with my head held high, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. I had my freedom. But as the elevator descended, taking me away from the monster in the penthouse, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to be free. The house in Oregon was beautiful. It was a craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where the loudest sound was the wind in the pine trees. It had been 7 days. 7 days of peace. 7 days of waking up without fearing an eviction notice. 7 days of watching Lily play in a backyard that didn't smell of exhaust fumes, and I was miserable. I walked down the aisle of the local organic grocery store, pushing a cart filled with healthy food. The music playing over the speakers was cheerful. The people around me smiled. I looked at a man standing near the dairy section. He was handsome in a safe suburban way. He smiled at me. I felt nothing. I looked at his hands. Soft. Unmarked. I compared them to Dante's hands. Scarred. Rough. Dangerous. Hands that had held a gun to save my life. Hands that had trembled while I stitched his flesh. I gripped the handle of the shopping cart until my knuckles turned white. A car backfired in the parking lot outside. Bang! I dropped to the crouch instantly, my hand flying to my waistband for a gun that wasn't there. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. People stared at me. The nice man by the milk looked concerned. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I stood up slowly, my face burning with shame. "I'm fine," I muttered. "Just startled." I abandoned the cart and ran out of the store. I sat in my new car, a sensible Volvo, and gripped the steering wheel, trying to breathe. I wasn't fine, I was broken. I had Stockholm Syndrome, I told myself. That was what the psychologists would say. I had fallen in love with my captor. I had trauma bonding. But deep down, I knew it was a lie. It wasn't that I was broken, it was that I had finally woken up. I had tasted power. I had tasted a life where I didn't have to be the victim. Dante hadn't just saved me. He had shown me that I had claws. And now, trying to pretend I was a domestic house cat was tearing me apart. I drove home in silence. When I walked into the living room, the TV was on. "Breaking news from Chicago," the anchor was saying. I froze. I turned up the volume. "Federal agents have raided the Vercetti Tower this morning following an anonymous tip. While no arrests have been made yet, sources say that Dante Vercetti, the CEO, is under investigation for a massive cyber laundering scheme." The screen showed footage of the tower, police tape, agents carrying boxes. Sources speculate that a rival syndicate may be involved in leaking evidence. Vadim. It was Vadim. He couldn't kill Dante, so he was destroying him legally. He was using the chaos from that night to plant evidence. And Dante? Dante was taking the heat alone. He hadn't used the hard drive. He hadn't implicated anyone else. He was standing in the fire, letting it burn him to keep his promise to me, to keep my name out of it. I looked at the thick envelope on the coffee table. The money, the freedom. It was hush money. It was protection. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, not a tear of sadness, a tear of rage. He thought he could decide for me? He thought he could push me into the light while he burned in the dark? I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I had memorized, Alessandro's personal line. It went to voicemail. I dialed again and again. I looked at Lily, who was coloring at the kitchen table. She looked happy, safe. "Lily, baby," I said, my voice steady. "How would you like to stay with Grandma Rose for a few days? Mommy has to go on a trip." "Is it for work?" she asked. "Yes," I smiled, a dangerous, sharp smile that felt like Dante's. "I have unfinished business." I went to my bedroom. I didn't pack jeans. I didn't pack sweaters. I opened the back of the closet where I had hidden the one purchase I had made that wasn't practical. A dress, black silk, backless, a weapon made of fabric. I pulled out the red lipstick I hadn't worn since before Travis ruined my life. I looked in the mirror. The scared girl from the apartment was gone. The woman looking back at me had eyes like frozen steel. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. And I was going to get my monster. The club was called Purgatory. It was an underground fortress in the heart of Chicago, the kind of place that didn't have a sign, just a heavy steel door and a bouncer who looked like he ate concrete for breakfast. It was midnight. The bass from the music inside thrummed against the pavement, a heartbeat of sin and excess. I walked up to the velvet rope. I was wearing the black silk dress under a trench coat. My heels clicked sharply on the wet pavement. I wore the red lipstick like war paint. The bouncer stepped in front of me, crossing his massive arms. "Private party, sweetheart. Name's not on the list. You don't get in." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I looked him dead in the eye. "Tell Alessandro that Elena is here," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the street. The bouncer hesitated. He looked at me, really looked at me. He saw something in my stance, the arrogance, the lack of fear. He touched his earpiece. He muttered something. A moment later, the heavy door opened. Alessandro stepped out. He looked tired. His suit was rumpled. When he saw me, his jaw practically hit the floor. "Elena?" he whispered. "What are you doing here? If the boss sees you—" "Get out of my way, Alessandro," I said, stepping past him. He didn't stop me. He actually stepped aside, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. I walked into the club. The sensory overload was immediate. Strobe lights. The smell of expensive sweat, perfume, and illegal substances. The music was deafening, a tribal rhythm that vibrated in my bones. I scanned the room. I knew where he would be. The VIP section, the balcony overlooking the chaos. I walked up the stairs. Security guards moved to intercept me, but Alessandro waved them off. I was Moses parting the Red Sea. I reached the top. There was a booth in the darkest corner, shadowed by velvet curtains. Dante was sitting there alone. He looked terrible. Beautiful, but terrible. His tie was undone. He held a glass of whiskey loosely in his hand. He looked like a king watching his kingdom crumble into ash. He looked lonely. I walked right up to the table. He sensed me before he saw me. His body tensed. His hand moved toward the inside of his jacket, a reflex. Then he looked up. The glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the table with a dull thud, spilling amber liquid over the polished wood. "Elena," he breathed. It wasn't a question. It was a prayer. "You're supposed to be in Oregon." I reached into my purse. I pulled out the thick envelope of money he had given me. I threw it onto the table. It landed in the puddle of whiskey. "I don't want your severance package," I said, my voice cutting through the music. Dante stood up. He towered over me, his presence overwhelming. "You don't understand what is happening. The feds!" "The feds are chasing a ghost trail that Vadim set up," I interrupted. "They are looking for a transfer to a Cayman account ending in 459. Dante froze. His eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "Because I spent the last week doing what I do best," I said, stepping closer, invading his personal space. "I hacked Vadim. I found the digital trail he planted. And I found the back door to his own servers." I placed a small USB drive on the table next to the soggy money. "That drive contains the proof that the evidence against you was fabricated. It also contains the coordinates of Vadim's current location in Moscow and his financial records." Dante stared at the drive. Then he looked at me. The shock in his eyes was replaced by a slow, burning heat. "Why?" he asked. "You were free." "Freedom is overrated," I said. "It's boring, and it's lonely." I took another step. My chest brushed against his. I looked up into those ice-blue eyes and saw the fire raging beneath them. "I'm not here for a handout, Dante. I'm here to apply for a job." "What job?" he rasped, his hand twitching by his side, fighting the urge to touch me. "Strategic advisor," I whispered. I reached up and ran my hand down the lapel of his jacket, resting my palm over his heart. It was hammering. "And partner." "Partner?" he repeated, in every sense of the word. Dante let out a ragged breath. "Elena, if you step across this line, there is no going back. You become part of this life. You become a target." "I was a target when I was a nobody," I said, fierce. "At least here I am a target with a gun." He stared at me for a long heartbeat. Then he smiled. It was the first real smile I had ever seen on his face. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't calculating. It was victorious. He grabbed my waist and pulled me flush against him. He sat back down on the leather banquette, pulling me down onto his lap. The sensation of being claimed was absolute. "You are insane," he murmured against my lips. "I learned from the best," I replied. He kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was possession. It tasted of whiskey and violence and forever. He kissed me like he wanted to devour me, like I was the only air in a room full of smoke. I wrapped my arms around his neck, deepening the kiss, claiming him right back. Below us, the club raged on, oblivious. But up here, in the shadows, a new alliance was forged. The king had his queen. Epilogue. The wind whipped my hair as we stood on the balcony of the penthouse. 6 months had passed. Chicago glittered below us, a sprawling grid of gold and darkness. It was cold, but I didn't feel it. Dante's arm was wrapped around my waist, his coat draped over my shoulders. Lily was asleep inside, safe in a room guarded by men who would die for her. She had the best doctors, the best schools. She was happy. Vadim? I asked, looking at the city. Gone, Dante said simply. The Russians have a new leader, one who understands boundaries. He turned me to face him. His shoulder had healed, leaving a jagged scar that I traced with my fingers every night. You know, he said, a playful glint in his eyes. I never thanked you for that text message. I laughed. The one where I threatened to send you to the FBI. The one where you walked into my life, he corrected. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch reverent. You sent it to the wrong number, Elena. I looked at him. I looked at the strength in his jaw, the devotion in his eyes. I thought about the fear I used to live in and the power I held now. I thought about the love that burned between us, a love forged in fire and blood. I smiled, leaning into his touch. No, Dante, I whispered. It was the only right number I ever dialed. The screen faded to black as the distant sirens of the city wailed their eternal song. But we were no longer afraid. We were the ones the city feared. And that, my friends, is how a wrong number became the only right choice Elena ever made. From a freezing apartment to the penthouse at the top of the world, from a victim to a queen who holds the leash of a monster. It's a reminder that sometimes fate's hands aren't gentle at all. Sometimes they push us off a cliff just to teach us how to fly. What did you think of Dante and Elena's journey? Did you love Elena's transformation from a scared mother to a fierce partner? Or did Dante's ruthless protection steal your heart? I want to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment down below with the word destiny if you enjoyed this story. It tells me that you want more dark, gritty romances like this one. If this story made your heart race, even just a little bit, please hit that like button. It supports the channel more than you know. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Fate's Gentle Hands and ring that notification bell. We have so many more stories waiting in the shadows. Tales of forbidden love, dangerous men, and the women who bring them to their knees. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Thank you for walking through the darkness with us. Until next time, trust your instincts and maybe double-check that phone number before you press send. Stay safe and keep dreaming dangerously.